Imagine being about 30 years old, working in banking as an SBA loan closer. Life is great. And then one day you decide to wake up and blow it all up and quit to go start something on your own. Well, that's exactly what my guest did just a couple of weeks ago. Matthias Smith now owns Pioneer Capital Advisory, a firm that helps entrepreneurs obtain SBA financing. Stick around to learn more about Matthias' story and why he decided to take this monstrous leap. We have a lot to get into, and I'm just going to jump right into it, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So, as we all know, you just quit your job and became a loan broker seemingly out of nowhere. And I want to get into all that, but I want to start at the beginning. Okay.
Sure.
How did you get into SBA lending?
Yeah, good question. So I started in SBA right out of college. So my last year of college, I'd been working at Chase Bank as a teller and also doing a business development internship for a company called Course Hero. And I was going through a couple different interviews, and most of them were just kind of typical corporate finance. You're going to sit here in your cubicle and like crunch out numbers all day in corporate America. And nothing about that honestly seemed interesting to me. So my last interview on a day of 4 back-to-back interviews was with an SBA shop based at Milwaukee. And the lender there just kind of sold me on it being the Wild West and kind of getting my feet wet and getting to work with different businesses across the board. And having direct access to the owners and the key employees and just getting to learn a lot that way.
Yeah, well, that's very lucky because it's very hard to crack into this industry at a young age. There's not too many people that are in their 20s, even, 30s. It's just one of those things. And it's becoming more and more like that, I feel like, because now that everyone's remote, it's even harder. You were probably learning in an office with someone, I would imagine.
Yep. Yeah. So I started working directly in a loan office. It was me and a guy about like 29, 30. So I was doing everything from packaging to closing and then keeping up the prospecting Excel spreadsheet, going on site visits, really everything. So it was a great learning experience. And I'm definitely thankful I got the opportunity to get into the industry that way.
So you ended up, I know you were at Byline for a while, which is one of the top SBA lenders in the country, and you were a closer there. How was that?
Yeah, so Byline was a great shop to learn at. The place I'd started out initially was very heavy on the real estate side. So all the deals I was working on were specifically owner-occupied commercial real estate. With Byline, I really got to see business acquisitions, the goodwill type deals, lots of non-real estate. Their credit box really kind of opens up like the whole SOP. So you get to see a lot that you don't see just at a real estate shop.
And there was like an award I saw on your LinkedIn that you had posted about a couple years back, the art of closing, which I think they might have stolen the name from me, but it's fine. I'll let them have it. But what is the art of closing award and why did they give it to you?
Yeah, good question, Ray. So that award actually came into place because of me. I was the first person.
Look at this guy. So humble.
Yeah, so the story behind the award is an interesting one. So the year I got it, it was the first year they gave it out. So the story behind it was I was working on a deal for a client, so a dentist based in Manhattan, New York, that was financing a new practice. So she was doing a build out for her second, I think it was her second location, and wrapping in a bunch of debt to refinance. One of the creditors we were paying off was a large US bank, and she had been going through colossal brain damage trying to get a payoff letter. So she had gotten into the branch multiple times, she had called the customer service, and we were like a week out from trying to close this thing. So wanting to not have to carve out that specific use of funds, we actually called downtown San Francisco Wells Fargo and got on a conference call trying to reach the CEO of the bank, which is my idea. And we got someone pretty high up at Wells Fargo on the line, and within hours we had the payoff letter. So that's the story behind the award.
Okay, so basically going above and beyond for your client.
Yep, essentially.
I think closing, like the closer role, is probably one of the hardest roles in our industry, because these deals, especially like the business acquisitions, commercial real estate, they take a while to get to the closer's desk, if you really think about it, because the thought in the seller's head comes into play. They call a broker, the broker lists it, they find a buyer, they go to a lender, they go through underwriting, and then finally they get to a closer, and they tell the closer, like, hey, we got to close yesterday, and then there's 8 months of baggage behind it from the time the seller had the thought in their head, and they're already over. How do you take that and run with it as a closer?
Yeah, so essentially what I would always do is I would tell them I'm going to try to get your deal closed as fast as I possibly can. So they're like I would kind of go through, here are the third party reports that we need to get, appraisal, BV. This is when we expect to have it back. And then I would add like a pillow of time to the back end, say like a week or whatnot. So we'll go off this time duration plus a week, and I think we can get done by then. That's what I would always do, because then the ball doesn't kind of fall back on you. You're kind of pointing back to these other exogenous time frames that are under your direct control. So that was always what I would do.
So when you started the closing process, did you have like a call with all the different parties involved to kind of set the tone?
Yeah, so I would have an initial kickoff call. I'd get the checklist put together. The checklist would go before the call, and then we just kind of go through it either top to bottom or answering specific questions as they relate to the checklist.
Did you have outside counsel usually?
On the deals we did, but not on the calls. I only once or twice did we have the outside counsel to call.
Okay, so it's really you talking to the borrower item by item, explaining it. And are you driving the closing process, or is the BDO driving the closing process?
It was always me. Sometimes the BDO would be involved periodically. Some of them were just completely wanting to be out of the picture once it was in closing to go hunt for the next deal. So it really spanned the gamut. Some were not involved at all in closing, and some were checking in every other day.
So we have a lot of BDOs that watch this podcast. From a closer's perspective, how do you think closers view each of those two different types of BDOs?
Yeah, so I would say, like, from my perspective, having the BDO involved enough so that you can pull them in when needed is valuable. So kind of striking a balance, really. But the ones that are constantly just checking in, where's this at? That can get a little tricky, because you're trying to run point on the process, and it can be cumbersome from that angle.
Well, I mean, not all closers are obviously, they're not created equal, just like all BDOs are not created equal. So do you think that the closer has to have that skill set of actually being able to take control over the close, like the deal and closing, and drive it home?
I would say so. Definitely. I mean, the ones where when you let someone else kind of run point in the process, you lose control. So setting that expectation right from the get go on the initial checkoff call, hey, I'm the quarterback of this deal. I'm going to get the ball across the 1 yard line for you. That really sets the expectation with the client in the front end and gives them confidence that you're able to deliver. So,
Yeah.
kind of using like a track analogy, when the baton gets handed off from the BDO to you, having the client know that you're going to take that baton and get across the finish line, it gives them confidence the deal gets done.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, that skill set is probably the hardest one to learn. Like, you can teach how to look at a document and what to look for. But the customer service component, having that sense of urgency in the closing is very tricky for closers to have, because closers come from the processing side of things usually. I feel like you came a little bit more from a sales, working closely with that initial guy probably helped you out. And now you're a broker, and you're an intermediary, and you're going to be dealing with lenders and meeting their closers. And I'm really excited to hear some of your experiences once you get some deals across the finish line.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it as well. So
Yeah. Well, let me get there. So I saw on your, on your LinkedIn, you jumped over to Live Oak after Byline, and you were there for about 6 months. What was it like working at Live Oak?
yeah, so going from Byline to Live Oak, so initially starting there, I was in their search fund division. So like investor buyouts or individuals, say like MBA students going into entrepreneurship or acquisition through entrepreneurship. That was the area I started in, and then I kind of shifted into the general SBA pond. Working at Live Oak, honestly, it was kind of like taking a tour of a Ford factory. I mean, they have a really good assembly type model or assembly line type model where you see kind of how the cake gets baked every step along the way. But everyone there, with the exception of the generalists, lenders, they're very kind of confined to a specific lending area. So I kind of got to see below the hood, so to say, like how some of these people really specialize in one industry and get deals done really quickly.
I don't see too many people that leave Live Oak. Why did you? After only 6 months, too.
Yeah, so part of it was so I got hired to work in that initial area, and there wasn't enough deal flow in it, so I got transitioned back into the SBA pond. And culturally speaking, well, I won't really go there, Ray, but um, I kind of got a little bit tired of just working from home all the time, and I wanted to see people's faces again and go back into the office. And Byline has a massive presence with a loan office of about 7 people. So I kind of felt like I got cabin fever having been from home ever since the start of COVID. And I really miss seeing people's faces and also just the familiarity with a shop you've worked at before.
Well, and as you're a closer at now multiple places and going back to buy, like, are you in your head thinking I'm a closer, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life? Or did you have at that time any other kind of plans for yourself?
Yeah, good question. At that point in time, I was just planning to remain a closer. So what I'm doing now, the idea behind it surfaced more recently in the last couple of months.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So you were at Byline then again for 6 months, and you left there and you ended up at First Business Bank. And then tell me what happened there.
Sure. So I went to First Business Bank, partly because the bank is based in the Madison, Wisconsin area. I live in some prairie just outside Madison, and I kind of thought working at a shop where the bank is based where I live, or sorry, where I live, would be a good way to have the opportunity to stop in and meet people, get some of the face-to-face interactions, build rapport, and grow my career at a place that's local to me essentially. Um, Around that time, a good friend and former attorney at Byline had reached out to me and said, "Hey Matthias, there are all these entrepreneurs on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatnot. You should go and start posting content related to SBA to help these folks out." So I kind of took like a fish to water, so to say, and started meeting all these people, networking with them, interacting with them, and sending referrals to First Business Bank. I without delving too much into the minutia, I got caught in a little bit of a crosshairs between the compliance and marketing department over my presence on social media. which I guess is understanding because the banking industry, there's the regulatory standpoint where there are things that you can and cannot do. And I was kind of more to the side of the spectrum, I guess, of what I shouldn't be doing, but it was helping the bank. So there were referrals that were coming in.
Your heart was in the right
So
place.
yeah, my heart was in the right place. So in mid-April, I was taking a trip to visit a friend in New York, and I was working for the day from the United Club, and there was a guy sitting across from me that was a former Marine. And I was talking to him and his wife about getting caught in this situation. And the guy told me, he said, "You're young. You need to go out and you just need to do this yourself." So I kind of had the thought start stewing in my mind then, what if I just go and become a broker? I'm going to go from having a W 2 job to kind of the eat what you kill mentality, so to say. But at the end of the day, whatever successes I have or failures, they're my own, right? You own it like a business owner. So the seed kind of got planted then. And then over the course of the next month, various things kind of popped up, which ultimately led to me going down this path. And I made the final decision when I was in Greece, essentially after having a check-in with my boss, where I got told I needed to get off social media and not talk banking or SBA. So just to reiterate, I mean, First Business Bank, people are great, culture is great. I just wasn't a fit culturally from that aspect.
I mean, it's obviously not a decision you made lightly. No one in banking quits and then becomes a broker at your stage in the career. Like I don't know that I mean, it's very rare. I mean, it's probably 1% of people to do that and wake up the next day without a salary, and that could go on for months. Spoiler alert, you may not have income for several months.
Yep.
That
No,
takes
I
that
know.
that takes a lot. Like, what was going through your head when you were making that final decision?
Yeah, so part of it, so okay, so I thought about potentially going the BDO route. And one thing that crossed my mind is like what I would want to do, I'd have to get vetted by the bank. I'd have to go back through the interview process and kind of make another hop to another place, right? So then I'd have to go back and explain how's this going to look having only worked at a place for 2 months. I even considered going the route of asking the head of the BDOs at First Business Bank about becoming a BDO, but I thought it would be an uphill battle with trying to navigate through the compliance of what I wanted to do to source deals. So
Hmm.
I realized in my head that that would not be a viable option. So then I thought to myself, I mean, there are folks like you out there in the industry and people I've worked with before, and I wanted to be able to work with all of them again, but kind of doing my own thing. So I realized if I kind of swam upstream like a salmon, I know that's a good analogy. If I could hack at doing this, I'd have the ability to do that. And I know it's a big risk, like you were saying, Ray. Potentially with it being 3 months or however long out before I see any money. It's something to laugh at. The risk is there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it's also, high risk, high reward. I mean, in the long run, you could make way more money doing this. Having a little pain for a few months, I mean, could pay off huge for you, especially with what you're doing. Because honestly, I see you around social media more so than anyone at and I have friends over there, and it is a great place to work. And we had Marty on the podcast, and everyone loves him. But I saw you more than the BDOs there because you were more visible as a closer, which is kind of odd. Um, so I think this is like gonna come natural for you.
Oh yeah, so I've always been a big social media person. I've been on Facebook since the end of middle school. I've been on LinkedIn since college, networking with people, trying to find jobs, talking to doing the coffee chats, trying to get your first internship and whatnot. Twitter is a more recent platform that I've joined and become super active on, but I think there's huge value in social media, Whether it's for someone like yourself meeting borrowers or just general networking, some of the smartest people in the world are on these platforms. And one kind of parallel note is when I was going through this moral dilemma over what to do with the social media, I was actually talking with Rich Handler, the CEO of Jefferies Investment Bank. He responded to me, kind of telling me that my heart was in the right place on this thing. So I think there's lots of value just from a networking standpoint alone. The smartest people in the world are just one direct message away.
Yeah, it is crazy. So you are now a broker. The name of your firm is what?
So the name of my firm is Pioneer Capital Advisory LLC.
Why?
The name, so Pioneer, the connotation behind it is kind of like cutting edge, moving to the next frontier, right? So think about like the old way deals were found. Lots of it is like word of mouth, going to conferences, like rubbing shoulders with people. Now, I mean, I have people reaching out to me on LinkedIn that I've never met before, and it's crazy. Same thing with Twitter too. So everything is on the table from a sourcing standpoint here. There's no idea that's off the table.
I still can't believe it, man. So you're sitting in Greece. You went with your wife,
Yep, I went with my wife. We were there for 2 weeks.
and are you guys just talking about this over dinner? She does know, right?
Yeah, so yep. Excuse me, she does know. Yeah, so we're sitting in Greece. Basically, every day I woke up, went to sleep, this moral dilemma was on my mind. And periodically, when we'd be talking with couples and people we're meeting, like asking what they do, what we do, this would somehow surface in conversations. And I had a fair number of people nudge me in this direction. So I know we talked on Twitter and we exchanged messages, but there are lots of firm nudges that were just, you need to go and do this. You're young, take a chance. If it doesn't work, you can always go back and get another job.
Yeah. Well, I was saying that I like the move because there's not a whole bunch of well, I actually don't know. Are you only going to work with like acquisition people? Or are you going to be more of a generalist?
So my plan is to be more of a generalist. And some of the content I put out there on Twitter, I kind of aim it towards acquisition since lots of people on that platform are in the space. But ultimately, I'll probably end up being more of a generalist. I know right now, like with rates rising, things like refinances aren't really out there as viable deals. So at some point, I'll start marketing myself more that way.
For what it's worth, I think niching down is a very powerful tool. And if you did only do acquisition, I think it really sets you apart because I only know a handful of brokers that do it and they do tremendously well. I mean, they're some of the most successful brokers I know doing, they now have multiple employees at their firm and they're doing the amount of volume they're doing is equivalent to like, some of the top probably 50 to 100 shops like SBA lenders. So and that's with niching down. But I also understand the other side where, you don't want to say no to something when you need to pay the bills, right?
Yeah, no, I've had some interesting stuff kind of come in. Like an hour after I put the post out on LinkedIn, I had a guy from South Africa literally email me a full package before I talked to him looking for an inventory loan. So things like that, I'm not going to really be able to help with. But no, if someone has a general SBA loan request, acquisition or not, I'd love to help out.
Well, yeah, and even the SBA, just doing SBA, if that is what you're going to specialize in, even that is a niche in and of itself, because a lot of brokers would use the SBA as one or two or three of their products, or it'd be one of three of their products or something like that. And some will do even all products across the board, which don't get me started on that. That's to me, you're pretty much a master of none. And then what you're doing basically is just pairing someone with a lender, which I think is becoming kind of like that's what that's what a broker used to do, I feel like. But now where I think a broker adds value, which I do believe this is in helping get the loan closed. And with you as probably one of the only loan brokers I know that has a strong SBA closing background, I think you'll be able to add tremendous value because you've been on the inside and you know that even the lender doesn't always know exactly what to do. They're making judgment calls and business decisions on their end, and the borrower has no idea, and you'd be able to help guide them through that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are lots of internal dialogues that are happening even during the closing process when things come up related to eligibility or what have you. And there are actually a couple of deals I'm looking at now where I've reached out to SBA directly, so 7A questions to get their take on eligibility and things like that nature. So, and a couple of former people I've worked with, like credit managers, I won't throw anyone's name out there, but just people to use as a sounding board for specific deals.
No, and there's a lot of different interpretations out there. It's a lot more complex than people realize, but that's why having someone in their corner can be, valuable. So I wish you luck with that, man. I think that's going to be really fun for you to build your own business. Is there any other kind of big ideas in the works that you want to share with us before we hop off?
Yeah, so at some point down the road, if this really takes off, what I would like to do is have kind of like a parallel vehicle, like a fund that will help with essentially providing the down payment or seed equity for some of these small businesses that, you have a proven concept, let's say like a manufacturing company with a GM that wants to buy out the owner but doesn't have the down payment. This is something that is kind of another thought on my mind, maybe in the next 18 to 24 months, that I would like to do. I would have to vet it out, of course, to make sure that it would pass the SBA eligibility requirements. Essentially, like I, as the referral source, would get paid for introducing the deal. The fund would take a non-controlling ownership stake in the business, and then it would just kind of go from there. So
Well,
it's an idea I've been putzing around a little bit.
the idea behind it is smart because, one of my favorite transactions to finance is a manager of a business buying the business. And often when you're an employee of a business, you're not making the profit, so you don't accumulate cash as fast as others would, but you have the knowledge, you know how to run the business, you've been there. That's the best person to buy the business and operate the business, oftentimes, not all the time. But that said, the cash is the tricky part, right? And you could do 5% seller standby note, but they still need 5% cash. And I, having that come from a fund, I would do that deal all day long where investors putting in 5, sellers holding 5, I'm doing 90, and the buyer knows the business inside and out. 100%. That's a great idea. Sign me up.
Awesome. No,
I'll
I
write a
have
check.
some former, or I have some friends that work in the private equity space, and I was actually looking at one of their private placement memorandums not too long ago to invest in, and the idea just kind of crossed my mind at that juncture.
Awesome. Well, good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I wish you all the luck in this new frontier of financing that you're taking on, man. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate it.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.